I'm Sydney.
And welcome back to Fixing the Fog. We are so excited that you're here for episode 2. If you haven't listened to our first episode yet, definitely go check it out. In that episode, we broke down what misinformation actually is and why it spreads so easily. That episode basically sets the foundation for everything that we're going to be talking about today.
Exactly. Today we're diving deeper. Now that we know what misinformation looks like, we're going to go over how to actually tell fact from fiction in the real world. And honestly, these are things that you can use every single day, whether you're scrolling, researching for school, or just trying to understand something happening around you.
Think of this episode as if it's your guide for spotting misinformation before it ever gets a chance to fool you. Alright, let's get started.
One of the most overlooked but super important fact-checking tools is the date. Literally just checking when something was posted.
Yes, dates sound so simple, but outdated information can be one of the biggest reasons misinformation spreads. When you use old sources for modern topics, the information might be missing new discoveries, new research, new context, or even corrections.
Our understanding of basically everything changes over time. Science updates, policies change, stats get revised, and sometimes what we believed was true before ends up being completely wrong later.
That's why staying up to date matters. If you're using a source from 2010 to explain something happening in 2025, you're probably not getting the full picture. You might not even be getting the right picture at all.
And this happens more often than people think. Sometimes older posts get reposted with no warning. Maybe someone screenshots something, shares it years later, and suddenly it looks brand new, even though it's totally outdated.
So here's what you do. Always look for the original posting date. If something has been reposted or shared through someone else, take an extra minute to track down where it came from and when.
I promise, it sounds tiny and tedious, but it can save you from falling for one of the easiest misinformation traps out there.
Another huge part of fact checking is checking the author. This is especially important for anything related to physical or mental health, medical topics, science, or anything that affects people's well-being.
A credible source will always tell you who wrote it or which organization published it. Some instantly trustworthy names include the National Institutes of Health, the American Psychological Association, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the National Institute of Mental Health.
Just because something isn't from one of those places doesn't mean it's untrustworthy. It just means you have to dig a little deeper. A quick search of the author's name usually tells you what field they're in, their level of education, where they worked, and what else they've written.
If you can't find any information about the author, that's a huge red flag. It doesn't automatically mean that the information is fake, but it means you shouldn't trust it without investigating it further.
And always think about whether the person is qualified to talk about the topic. An example can include a dermatologist giving skincare advice, which makes sense. However, a random influencer with no training giving medical diagnosis does not.
Especially with mental health. Anyone can talk about their personal experiences, but when someone makes claims that sound clinical or scientific, you want to know who they are and whether or not they have the training to say that confidently and correctly.
Now we're getting into something that most people don't realize is a problem: warning traps.
Yes, these show up everywhere. News headlines, Instagram captions, TikTok voiceovers, articles, blogs, titles, you name it.
Warning traps are specifically when the language is designed to be emotional or shocking instead of accurate. It's essentially meant to grab your attention and make you feel something before you even know the facts.
Sometimes that's harmless, but a lot of the time it makes information seem scarier, more urgent, or more dramatic than it really is.
When that happens, we react emotionally instead of logically. We forget to ask questions. We forget to check if the information is actually true.
And emotional wording can also make things seem more black and white than they really are. That's where false dilemmas come from. When information makes it seem like there's only two options, only two outcomes, or only two explanations.
Real life is rarely that simple.
So, how do you avoid wording traps? The biggest strategy is awareness. If you see something that makes you feel scared, angry, shocked, or defensive right away, take a step back and ask yourself, why is this written that way? What emotion is this trying to trigger? Am I reacting to the headline or to the facts?
Once you do that, you can actually start seeing the information for what it is, not for what it's trying to make you feel.
Another huge place where misinformation spreads is through quotes. And honestly, this one is one of the easiest ways people get tricked.
So many quotes online are fake, misattributed, edited, or completely taken out of context, especially on aesthetic quote pages, TikToks, or infographics.
If a quote feels off or if it doesn't have a real author listed, do a simple search. Copy and paste the exact wording into your search bar and see what comes up.
If nothing comes up, that's already a red flag.
If something does come up, please make sure that you understand the context. Look at what's happening before and after the quote was said.
And just like with authors, we have to check whether the person who said the quote is even qualified. A chef commenting on psychology probably shouldn't be used as evidence for mental health research.
The main point is, a quote alone doesn't prove anything. You have to check where it came from.
This takes us into the big one, critical thinking.
Misinformation comes in every form. Pretty graphics, emotional videos, long paragraphs, screenshots, facts, stories, and even fake experts. That's why critical thinking matters so much.
Critical thinking basically means questioning everything you read, not in a negative or a paranoid way, but in a thoughtful way.
Critical thinkers ask questions like, what's the source? Who wrote this? When was it published? Why was it created? What evidence is being used? What evidence is being left out? Who benefits if I believe this? Does this match with what multiple credible sources say?
When you start doing this regularly, it becomes a habit. You stop taking the internet at face value. You slow down, you analyze, and you think.
And the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. Suddenly, things that used to seem legit start looking suspicious right away. You'll start recognizing patterns of misinformation, even when the post looks super polished and professional.
Critical thinking is honestly one of the strongest tools any of us can have. It protects us from being misled and helps us actually understand the world around us more clearly.
So, today we talked about dates, authors, wording traps, verifying quotes, and critical thinking. These are the building blocks for sorting truth from misinformation.
And we're not expecting anyone to be absolutely perfect or to catch everything. Using even one or two of these strategies makes you way less likely to fall for false or misleading information.
In our next episode, we're going to dive into how misinformation spreads and the psychology behind why people fall for it. Basically, why our brains are tricked so easily. Because honestly, it happens to everyone.
Thank you so much for listening to episode 2 of Fixing the Fog. And remember, stay curious, stay aware, and keep clearing the clouds with clarity.